We're back again with a little something different. I figured since I did the video about who was the best Harley Quinn, or who is so far, I wanted to rank the Batman movies from worst to best. Now, which movies are we talking about here? Well, none of those cartoon movies that come out, they come out all the time. It'd be hard to keep up and try to really rank them, plus some of them have a higher budget than others, so of course they're usually going to be good. The 7 we're going to be talking about is the 4 originals, the 2 Tim Burton, the 2 Joel Schumacher movies, and the Christopher Nolan trilogy, Batman Begins, Dark Knight, and The Dark Knight Rises. Those are the 7 that we're going to be talking about specifically. You're probably wondering, why aren't I adding Batman vs. Superman on here? I wanted more of like intentional standalone Batman movies. Like, I get it, the last one is called Batman and Robin, but it was still the 4th movie in what was a series of Batman movies, so I'm counting it there, whereas Batman vs. Superman to me is just still more of a thing that was supposed to kick off the DC universe to lead into Justice League and all that kind of stuff, so I'm not counting that on here. So no Ben Affleck movies. He hasn't had a solo Batman movie anyway, but that Batman vs. Superman was the closest he's come. But yes, this list is very, very subjective. I know my opinions might differ from yours, but I can tell you that my pick here for the worst one, we might agree with here. Batman and Robin from 1997 with the star-studded cast. George Clooney as Batman. Chris O'Donnell returns as Robin. Alicia Silverstone is now Batgirl. Michael Gough returns for another go-round as Alfred. Pat Hingle's back as Commissioner Gordon. And then, of course, you got the bad guys. Uma Thurman as Poison Ivy, and Arnold Schwarzenegger as Max Fries, or Mr. Freeze in this case. This one was, I think, the first movie where Tim Burton wasn't a part of it. I'll get to that in a minute. He was a part of Batman Forever, just not in the way that you would think. So this is all Joel Schumacher's creative prowess here, and of course, I mean, I guess the one thing that gets on everybody's nerves is the bat nipples. For some reason you needed that on a suit. Wasn't on Batgirl's suit because, God forbid, Alfred's niece has nipples on her suit, but that is the one thing that irritates me about this movie. Batgirl being Alfred's niece, that was never a thing in the comics. Like, again, okay, Joel Schumacher was trying to do what Tim Burton did, like, say, with his Joker story or the Penguin, where he changes the story up a bit, but you can still see the, you know, the character being who they actually are. So instead of making Barbara, not even Gordon, it's Barbara Pennyworth, Jim Gordon's daughter, he ends up making Barbara Alfred's niece, which means she's a Pennyworth in this case, which is weird because she doesn't speak British. Like, I understand that Alicia Silverstone was like the hot commodity for like younger female stars back then, but like, you could have at least, like, I don't know, it was very confusing, that one, and although the story may be easier to follow than you think, Mr. Freeze is trying to find a cure for his frozen wife, so to do that he wants to freeze Gotham and basically hold it for ransom until he gets what he wants, and throughout this whole movie, Alfred is actually sick, and it turns out the disease that he has, stage 1 McGregor, is also the rare disease that Mr. Freeze's wife has, so Batman sort of comes to this understanding, and throughout this whole thing, Batman and Robin are fighting because when Poison Ivy kissed them, obviously the whole love thing wore off on them, so it was like she was trying to tear them apart, although they didn't end up falling for it. And in the end, none of them die. You'll see that, I mean, as a recurring theme. I mean, Tim Burton's Batman, you did see it, but with Joel Schumacher, Mr. Freeze looks like he's going to die, but they send him to Gotham and say, hey, you know what, though? We're going to give you the tools you need, and we're going to keep your wife there so that way you can keep doing your research to hopefully cure her. And they also made her cellmates with Poison Ivy because Poison Ivy did basically portray Mr. Freeze by pulling the plug on his wife's little ice capsule thing because she was cryogenically frozen, so he was kind of pissed off about that too. But yeah, plus the slapstick comedy is just not it. Like, I get that they were trying to give this one a more, you know, lighter comic book feel, but Joel Schumacher's was just so cheesy. I don't think George Clooney is the worst Batman, though. The worst Batman is the one from this movie. Batman Forever from 1995. I mean, when it comes to this one, I think I can watch it a little bit more. Like, even with the old Batman movies, they're not super long, they're barely over 2 hours, so I can at least sit through them. And Batman Forever still has Tim Burton's help. He is the producer of this movie, but yet this was the first where Joe Schumacher went out and directed. So you kind of have a mixture of like Tim Burton's dark comic book feel with Joe Schumacher's more upbeat, family-friendly type stuff. This one is the movie that features Jim Carrey as the Riddler, of course, and Tommy Lee Jones as Two-Face. Now, Tommy Lee Jones was a really good pick for Two-Face here. It was kind of weird because if you remember in the first Batman, Harvey Dent was played by Billy D. Williams, and now Harvey Dent is being played by Tommy Lee Jones. You know, whatever, they never really mentioned that anyway, but yeah, and Jim Carrey, say what you want about him, but as this type of Riddler, the more kooky, kind of, you know, comic book friendly Riddler, I think he did fine. I mean, he can be annoying at some points, but I think, you know, this really showed us some more, I guess you can say, serious side to him, because this was more a serious movie. Chris O'Donnell makes his debut as, Robin in this movie. We find out he's part of this, you know, circus act with his family, and when Tommy Lee Jones' Two-Face goes in and blows the place up, his parents fall, his parents die, and Batman takes him in, and eventually he becomes Robin. And the Batman in this movie is Val Kilmer. I don't know, I've never really thought that Val Kilmer was that good of a Batman to begin with. I think he's the worst person to play Batman so far. Was he horrible? I don't really think anybody that's played Batman has been horrible. I just think the problem with Kilmer and Clooney is they get bad rap because they didn't really have a good script to go off of. Like, I think, you know, I'll look at it this way. George Clooney fits the whole Bruce Wayne thing, you know, older, rich guy, you know, good looking, you know, he fits that. Val Kilmer back then, okay, maybe the good looking thing, you know, whatever, but he was still a little bit younger, and it just, I don't know, I didn't feel it as much, but I felt like with a better script, it could have worked a lot better. So yeah, Batman Forever, it's one again that I can probably sit through and watch, but I'm just not really looking to go back to it often. This is when the list might get a little bit controversial, if you even want to call it that. I have The Dark Knight Rises at number 5, the finisher of the Christopher Nolan trilogy. It's always the third movie that ruins the trilogy somehow, some way, but here we have it. I get it, they had to scrap the original idea of, you know, Joker being in Arkham, taking it over, because of Heath Ledger's death. I get that they had to change it up a bit, but make Bane the main bad guy like that, like, you hadn't had a live-action adaptation in the big screen of Penguin or the Riddler in a while. You could have added one of them in there, but instead you decided of all characters, Bane? That voice is just so, like, I hate it. Like, I'd rather prefer the Bane from Batman and Robin than the Bane that Tom Hardy played in The Dark Knight Rises. It's just more funny to me hearing him talk. Like, I know it's supposed to be intimidating, and it's because he has to wear that face mask to take the medicine to help him stay alive, but it comes off as so, like, he would talk to me, and you can't understand half of the things he says, and it's just so fucking hilarious. Like, it really is hilarious. Christian Bale does okay as Batman, but I think the problem with this is it's just so over-bloated. He's Batman for like 20 minutes in like a almost 3-hour movie, and he just... I think this was Christian Bale's weakest Batman movie overall. It just... I remember sitting there in the theater watching it and going, wow, they really tanked it with this one, because they had to rush it out at this point. You know, their original idea was over, we gotta come up with something quick, and for the most part, I mean, when it comes to Batman movies, this was the worst Batman movie they had made since Batman and Robin, and that's saying a lot because that movie was terrible. Number 4, now we're kind of at the mediocre, I guess you can say, and that is the beginning of the Christopher Nolan trilogy, Batman Begins. I think what puts this right at number 4, like right near the middle, is that it kind of starts very slow, but it does pick it up at the end. I do like Liam Neeson coming in and playing Ra's al Ghul. This was our introduction to Christian Bale as Batman, which, fun fact, Tom Cruise was supposed to be Batman in Christopher Nolan's trilogy, but I think he had a Mission Impossible movie that he was working on, and he wanted to work on that because nobody realized that the Batman trilogy would take off. But anyway, yeah, with its slow start, sometimes you're just kind of slouched in your chair, but once it picks it up, it really picks it up. We get the introduction of Scarecrow, and like I said, we find out later that Liam Neeson's Deckard character is actually Ra's al Ghul, who's trying to, you know, put out this poisonous gas to destroy Gotham because it's just a wasteland of a city. And in the end, Batman kind of lets him die on the train. He does say, I'm not going to kill you, but I don't have to save you, so he just grapples off the train, to which the train hits the barricade under the bridge and just blows up, leaving Ra's al Ghul dead, kind of flashing you back to the first ever Batman movie when Batman grapples the gargoyle on the Joker and basically just lets him fall, like he doesn't even attempt. So you can basically say that he did murder the Joker in the first movie, but yeah, again, I do like the way it feels though, you know, it's still got that dark atmosphere, so it's a passable Batman movie. It's just, again, maybe not one that I want to go back to often, but if it's on, I'll watch it. Number 3 to me is probably the most underrated Batman movie in my opinion. I mean, when you look at it, this is the second least grossing Batman film of all time, just above Batman and Robin, but the sequel to Tim Burton's Batman, Batman Returns, to me is still a classic that I love to go back to. For some reason, when you see that Danny DeVito's Penguin, you can't help but laugh, but then you see him in the movie and you're actually like, oh, not bad. This is actually really, really good, and they kind of give him a little bit of a different backstory. Like, he does come from a rich family, as he does Mr. Oswald Cobblepot, but at the beginning of the movie, it's him as a baby, and his parents don't like the fact that he's a little deformed and funny looking. Instead, they take him to the sewer and just kind of push him in, and he ends up getting raised by penguins in the sewer, you know, because that makes sense. But, you know, it is what it is. He still stays true to the funny little penguin character that we know, again, giving it a little bit of a darker tinge. It's also the introduction of Catwoman, played by Michelle Pfeiffer, and that one gives you a good idea as to what kind of happened to her, what led her to get where she was. Obviously, she died and she was resurrected by cats, but we kind of go through her story. She originally wants to team up with Penguin because Batman is the only thing getting in their way, and then she realizes that Mr. Cobblepot is too violent and doesn't want to be, you know, killing people and all this kind of stuff, and she ends up cutting it off with him, and then we find out that maybe she's not as bad after all, because in the end, her character and Bruce Wayne were kind of getting together, and once they found out who each other were, they kind of gained more of a soft spot for each other. This is also the movie where Penguin comes out and kind of makes this ruse about saving the mayor's baby, because he's upset that Batman's getting all this attention because someone so messed up is doing good things, getting recognized, and yet he's so messed up, and yet he can't get recognition that he deserves, so he makes this ploy to act like the mayor's baby was stolen and he saved it, and then he runs for mayor, almost ends up winning, until Batman catches him recording where he says, screw Gotham, this city, this, that, and the other, and then people turn on him, he gets mad, he wants to kill Batman, and in the end, Penguin ends up dying. That was a theme in the Tim Burton movies, was the main villain usually ended up dying in the end somehow, some way, but it's an adventure, it's a nice one, and when people talk about, like, these Batman movies here, nobody really talks about Batman Returns, and it's a shame, because again, it is really good. It was the last movie that had Michael Keaton as Batman, and he's still the best interpretation of that to this day. I don't know, this one's just, it's a mixture of fun, but that dark Tim Burton tinge will still keep you highly, highly interested. Number 1 and number 2 were so hard. so hard, but I put The Dark Knight at number 2 in 2008 because, I mean, it seems like the best Batman movies are when Joker is the main villain. I mean, why wouldn't it be? The Joker was like the first villain. He was in Batman issue 1 in 1940 as the first villain, ever for Batman, so, that's why he's probably the most popular comic book villain of all time, especially when it comes to Batman villains. It's just, the way Heath Ledger went about doing this character was so surprising. I mean, I had my doubts when I saw he was casted, but good lord, he went off, his Joker had no backstory. We just know he's a psychopath. That's all we know, and I do like the extra, all the cuts on the face to make it look like he's smiling. The look was a little bit more gritty and less friendly. It was a lot more darker and violent than what we're used to. Not that the Joker isn't dark, but he was dark for comic book standards, but this was, out of control, and I think he carries the movie a lot. Christian Bale does okay, and whatnot, and all the other characters do fine, but Heath Ledger was the reason that this movie just soared high and above, and I really, really wanted to see him in the Arkham Asylum movie that they planned on making, because I bet you he would have upped it from 10 to 11 in that one as well, and we probably would have saw the debut of Harley Quinn from what I was hearing in that movie too, but we got it years later, not as quick as we wanted to, but yes, The Dark Knight to me will always be a classic. Sure, it's long. I think it's the second longest Batman movie ever, but it's not like The Dark Knight Rises where it just carries on for way too long with nothing. It gives you something, it sticks with it, and holy crap, the performances are just some top tier. But number one, I don't know how much of a cop-out this is. I gotta go with the original Tim Burton Batman. There's just something about it that really kick-started everything for the DC Universe. I mean, Wonder Woman and Superman really got it kicked off when you talk about Wonder Woman having that TV series in the early 70s, and then in the late 70s you had Superman 1 come out, and that ended up being 4 movies. But when this Batman movie came out, it proved that you could have darker-leaning superhero movies. Every time you saw a superhero cartoon or a superhero show or movie back then, it was more kid-friendly than usual. And even though it followed the comics, it wasn't as dark as the comics would be. And with Batman, you kind of have to have that dark aspect to it, or else it's just not interesting at all. I mean, this is about a guy who goes around dressed as a bat because his parents got murdered when he was younger. It's just, you have to make it dark, and Tim Burton did a good job of making it just dark enough and just family friendly enough to where it's very interesting. Michael Keaton gives us a great interpretation of Batman, and Jack Nicholson's Joker. I still think Heath Ledger did the best, but when it comes to comic book adaptations, Jack Nicholson nailed it. He actually has my favorite Joker laugh of all time. When it comes to the Joker laughs, he is able to nail it so good. And I like, too, the fact that this Joker has more of a backstory. We know he's this criminal named Jack Napier, who's basically a psychopath. He was already a psychopath to begin with, but when he fell into that vat of ooze, and it deformed his face, and he became the Joker, he becomes more crazy and more power-hungry, and just wants to kill the Batman, to which he almost does at the end, but as I mentioned earlier, while Batman and Vicky Vale are hanging off of the big Gotham, it was church, Batman takes his batarang, wraps it around this loose gargoyle as Joker is climbing up the helicopter stairs to escape, and boom, the gargoyle falls, and the weight's too much. The Joker falls with it, and he falls to his death, leading to basically the Joker being over. I think that is the one thing I dislike about this movie. Batman has this no-kill policy, and yet in the first movie you're going to have the bad guy die, considering this is one of his more popular villains. I felt just killing him off that early wasn't the right thing to do. I really don't know what else to say with that, because keep in mind, he was Jack Napier until 30 minutes in, and then he was the Joker all for 3, 4, 5 days, and then he just died. It's I don't really think that's how that happened. Now the Joker has died many times and come back somehow, some way, but in the 4 main Batman films, he's just gone for the rest of they don't even mention him for the rest of the movies at all, whereas all the other movies they kind of mention each other and piggyback off each other. The first movie, after the Joker dies, you never hear about him again. It's just very, very weird, but the performances are great, and there's just a lot of great things about it. I think with this one, you gotta look, he's not Batman a lot, but the way he goes about doing the detective work and just the other scenes are interesting enough, especially the scenes with the Joker. Like, I really, really love when the Joker goes to meet Vicky Vale for that date that she thought she was having with Bruce Wayne, and she throws the water on his face, leading to his skin-colored makeup to come off, and you see his white bleached face, and he's like, like acting like it burns and stuff like that. He played that off so perfectly. And when he says, "Have you ever danced with the devil in the pale moonlight?" shoots Bruce Wayne. I mean, it's just perfect, like perfect. Like this, like that one-liner there is what Joel Schumacher wanted his one-liners to be. It's just something about Tim Burton that made it perfect. Like, you would have never thought that Tim Burton and Batman would go well, but they did, and I really, really, really wish he would direct another Batman movie, because I want to see what kind of direction he would take it in now, because his renditions were just so perfect. His two movies that he was able to direct were just great. But yeah, that's my list for ranking the Batman movies from worst to best. I also didn't include the 1966 one, in case you didn't notice, because that was supposed to be more of a test for the TV series that was about to come out, and that one was, supposed to be just childish and kooky because it was, so I am not gonna count, I wasn't gonna count that one in the movies, a more, I guess you can say, the serious type here as well, even though technically that would have been a Batman standoff movie. I can't really count it in these classics here. Like, the old show was what it was, but I just can't put that up against these other great, more high-budget movies. So, yeah, that's my list. You can tell me in the comments below, how would you rank the Batman movies from worst to best? Mainly the Tim Burton, Joel Schumacher, and Christopher Nolan movies is all I'm looking for, from 7 being the worst and 1 being the best. Let me know what you think. But until then, stay safe out there. Wear your mask, get vaccinated, and I will catch you all in the next one.